Well, there's a article that caught my attention at Silver Doctors. James Rickard. This is one of those guys who's been, can reach out to some people and talk to people that you and I could never dream, could only dream of talking to. He was interviewed recently, and Silver Doctors covered the dialogue basically, but there's only one real main section. I mean, there's actually more than that. There's quite a bit on here, but I want to cover a couple of his responses. Okay, the longest responses he gave, because that's where the meat and potatoes is, if you know what I mean. And this guy, he's been interviewed by a guy named Albert. It starts off, they seem to be following, the Fed seems to be following through on some of these rate hikes. Vice Chair Stanley Fischer says he sees 2 more rate hikes coming in 2017. Do we believe him? And should we care either way? So James, or sometimes it's called Jim, Jim or James Rickard, whatever. James says yes and yes. We should believe him and we should care. Albert, going back to the last December, of course, December 2016, the Fed raised rates, and then immediately after that, based on my analysis, I'll explain the model I use because it's fairly straightforward. I said the Fed would raise rates again in March 15th, 2017. I said that in December. I said it in January. I said it in February. What was amazing to me, we had the Fed funds futures contract, and you can look at the price that the Fed funds futures and do get the market probability. What probability of the market is assigning to another rate hike by the Fed. And as you follow the wisdom of crowds and so forth, you will say, well, this is all the money in the world, all the interested parties in the world coming together in one very liquid marketplace setting a probability. And then in December, they put a 28% probability on the rate hike for March. A 28% probability. Throughout January, it was 30%. February, it was 30%. The whole time, I was thinking 75 to 80%. Quite certain they would raise rates. You never want to say 100%. That's silly, but I was going to 80% converging on 100%. Then suddenly, in 3 trading days, right around the end of February, early March, kind of February 27th, 8th, March 1st, 2nd, the probability went from 30% to 80%. That was caught up to where I was all along. It was one of those hockey stick charts where it's flat and it just goes vertical. And then, of course, by March 15th, all of us converged on 100% probability. It was very clear that the Fed was going to raise rates by that point. But I was amazed. It was very clear to me in December. Hang on. Sorry for having to pause that, but one of my kids was trying to get my attention. I could tell, they need me. So I just paused it. What's up? Daddy's hint to my subscribers. Riffraff. Little Riffraff. I thought he was 6 or 7. He's 5. He's 5. He had our flying. He was playing our flying turtle, and that marker, that fine point marker that was out there, permanent. Yeah. He was coloring all over. He was like drawing all over the handlebars and everything to handle things. Okay. Go outside. Riffraff. Was that you? Of course I didn't call him by this. That's my nickname, but I didn't call him that. Riffraff. Did you do that? Gives me the riffraff stare. Riffraff, did you do that? Did you draw on this? No. I didn't. Wasn't me. You were playing on it this whole time, and you had the marker in your hand when I came out here. Wasn't you. No. Riffraff, come here. Look up there. Do you see that camera in my garage? It records everything out here. I was in the middle of doing a YouTube video. I do videos every night. Now I have to stop. I tell them this. Everybody's out there listening. I have to stop now to go find out who is drawing all over my kids' toys with permanent marker stuff. You're sure it wasn't you? No. Let me just tell you this. God help you if I find out it was you when I go in here and look at these cameras. You sure it wasn't you? No. Okay. Went inside. We see him pick up the marker. He picks up something. He's already drawing on it. Looks like he might be drawing on the left handlebar thing. In a flying turtle is like this little skateboard looking thing. You sit on it and you push your feet out like this and it goes. I used to have when I was a kid. I don't think they were called that, but that's what they call them nowadays. And we have a rule, especially when we have riffraff in the neighborhood. No one is allowed to ride your bikes. Everybody, kids, nobody's allowed to ride your bikes. And your little scooter things, nobody's allowed to ride those. No one. These little flying turtle things, don't care too much. They can ride those things. That's okay. But that's about it. Why? Because they're going to destroy, the riffraff will destroy your stuff as fast as they can. So, another thing, I tell them, guys, you can use these flying turtles. You can play it, but do not go in the grass. Stay out of the grass. See that green sign right there? It says, please stay off the lawn. I need you to stay off it because I'm getting letters from the HOA company telling me you got little spots in your grass. Well, that's because the whole neighborhood's running around my grass. Kids, tell their friends, tell everybody not to stay in the grass. Most of them seem to listen. Except riffraff. Neighborhood riffraff doesn't listen. Keeps doing it over and over. So, before we can even go back out there, yep, he'd already admitted it. It was him. Okay. Riffraff. Why did you write on that? That's our property. My kids, they own it. You're allowed to use it. Why are you writing and damaging my stuff? Nothing but the riffraff stare. Got nothing but the riffraff stare. Okay. I showed you guys a video a little while back. That little apocalypse trike thing I had, and then the big pedicab one that's electric. Can pull the driver plus like 3 or 4 other people in the back of the thing. Cruising the neighborhood. Kids love it. Riffraff loves it. Now, see, OJ4 doesn't discriminate. Kids, have a good time. Come on over. That's fine. Everyone will take turns. You guys can have your little ride. And then, of course, Riffraff's cousin came over and tried to throw the thing through the spikes or whatever, and then or the spokes, and then throw rocks and all that crap. That was Riffraff's cousin. So I said, I told you. God help you if I find out it's you. Listen to me. Everything that we own in this house, everything out here, you are never, ever allowed to play with again. You see this little pedicab thing, the one you always love riding in the back? You always ask me every day if you can ride in it? Yeah. You are never riding in it again. You can't damage other people's property. Just a little bit earlier, before that, they had a little bucket out there. All the kids, they were playing, making little mud stuff, dirt in the bucket. I said, guys, you can play with that. Just don't put it on don't dump it and mess with it on the sidewalk. Don't dump it on, anywhere around here, driveway, sidewalk. Dump it in the grass if you need to dump it in the grass. So riffraff, I come up the driveway and there's a bunch of piles of dirt, like sandy dirt, right in the driveway. And I see riffraff trying to scrape it up. Riffraff, do you remember a few minutes ago? I said you guys can play with this stuff, but you can't pour it out in the driveway, on the sidewalk. Yeah. And then as I say that, everyone else says, oh, he knew. He just picked it up and just completely, it wasn't even an accident. He dumped it all over to do it on purpose. Okay. So I went ahead and got my little push broom out. I said, riffraff, have you ever gotten a belt, a beating with a belt? Have you ever been beat with a belt in your life? His brother and sister, his sister is extremely sweet. Sweetest little child you ever met. No idea how she's kin to riffraff, but they both say, her and the older brother, yes, he has. Yes, he has gotten a beating, a whooping with the belt. Definitely. Okay, just checking. Not that I'm going to hit someone's kid, but I thought, I'm thinking the parents might need to take care of riffraff. Riffraff is getting on my nerves at 5 years of age, just like the previous riffraff that they replaced months ago, who was 4 years old, turned 5. writing on our screen porch, chalking up everything, trying to steal our toys inside the house. It's mine. I own that now. No, what the? No, you don't. That's ours. Anyways, sorry to go off on a tangent, but duty calls sometimes. And I have to let everybody know what it's like dealing with riffraff in an area that I'm not supposed to be dealing with riffraff in. I pay my taxes. I pay all my bills. I pay high rent. I'm a high rent payer, according to what they say around here anyways. You know, as far as what the area suggests rent is, like everywhere else. Only to find out, subsidized riffraff, here you go. It's like taking a giant dump on your lawn every day that you have to pick up. That's kind of what that's like. You know, thanks Obama, HUD, Section 8, appreciate that. You allowing them to get subsidized and move into nice neighborhoods so they can destroy the nice neighborhoods. Okay, so back on track. So he was saying essentially 100%, he was sure of it, 80 to 100%, we were absolutely going to be raising rates. Then suddenly in 3 trading days, right around the end of February, early March, again, February 28th, 9th, 27th, 28th, March 1st, 2nd, that time frame, the probability went from 30% to 80%. That was caught up to where I was all along. It was one of those hockey stick charts where it's flat and it goes just goes vertical. And then, of course, by March 15th, all of us converged on 100%. Probability, of course. It was very clear that the Fed was going to raise rates by that point, but I was amazed. It was very clear to me in December that they were going to do it. The market stated 30% sure. Why is that? Just because markets are collective wisdom and they're liquid doesn't mean they're always going to get it right. Sometimes they have these catch-ups, so to speak. The reason is that the market, believe it or not, actually doesn't understand why the Fed is raising rates. I realize that that's a major statement. Let me take a minute to unpack that a little bit. Here's my analysis. The economy is fundamentally weak. The Fed is raising rates into weakness. By the way, I expect they'll raise again in June. So here we are in late March, coming up in April. I'll just say that as of now, my expectation is they're going to raise again in June. That is what Vice Chairman Stanley Fischer suggested yesterday. Again, this is several days ago. But they're not raising them because the economy is strong. Actually, the economy is fairly weak. They're raising it for a completely different reason. This rate hike cycle that the Fed is in is detached from the business cycle, which is the boom and bust cycle. Normally, the way that it works is the economy gets stronger, labor markets tighten, unemployment goes down, inflation picks up, and the Fed is watching the whole time, and they say, you know what, we better raise rates. Then they raise rates. Sure enough, the economy slows down, unemployment goes up, inflation comes down, we get close to a recession, maybe we're in a recession, and the Fed is watching, and the Fed says, oh, we better cut rates, and so forth. So we have this nice kind of sine wave, the cycle. But what's important about that is the Fed does not lead the economy. The Fed follows the economy. So as the economy is going up, the Fed is watching, and then they tighten. And as the economy cools down, the Fed watches, and then they ease. So the Fed follows the economy through the business cycle, and that's what the market is saying. All right, so anyways, so the Fed follows the economy through the business cycle, and that's what the market is saying. But that's not what's going on right now. What's going on is the Fed is trying to raise interest rates even though the economy is weak, because they're trying to raise them to get them high enough so that they can cut them in the next recession, which could be coming very soon. I mean, we're 8 years into an expansion. This is extraordinarily long. This is long by post-1980 standards, which is an era of long expansions. It's double the average expansion since the end of World War II. This is an extremely long expansion. It's been a weak one of the weakest expansions in U.S. history, but a very, very long one. So no one should be surprised if we have a recession tomorrow, let's say. I'm not forecasting that. I'm just saying that we're at a stage where we could easily have that happen. The Fed knows this. Now, the data shows that you have to cut interest rates 3 to 4 full percentage points, 300 basis points. And there's a little more. to get the U.S. out of a recession. How do you cut interest rates 3% when you're only at half of 1%? The answer is you can't. You've got to, and by the way, the evidence is that negative rates don't work. Negative rates are not more of the same, like more cutting when you go from 0 to minus 25 or minus 50 basis points, so a quarter to 0.5%. Technically, you're cutting rates, but that does not have the same effect as cutting positive nominal rates, so that doesn't work. Going from 0 to minus doesn't do anything, but going from 3% down to 2% does something, is what he's saying. So the Fed is desperately trying to get the rates up so that when recession hits, they can cut them again to get us out of the recession. The problem is, can you raise rates in a weak economy without causing the recession you're trying to cure or getting rid of the cure? My view is that they're not going to be able to pull it off. Why is the Fed in this situation? Well, the reason is they missed an entire tightening cycle. The time to raise rates was 2010, 11, and 12. In the early stages of the recovery, that's when you raise interest rates. The Fed did not. They skipped the whole cycle because of Ben Bernanke's crazy experiment with zero interest rate policy in QE1, QE2, and QE3. I think the viewers are very familiar with all of that. We don't have to revisit all that. We'll look back, and this will be viewed as a major failed monetary experiment where we're all the guinea pigs. But they skipped the cycle, so now they're playing catch up. So they're raising rates at the worst possible time because they're trying to catch up and get them high enough so they can cut them when the next recession comes, and do that without causing recession, which they probably will, because they're going to force it by raising the rates now when they shouldn't be. Now, the market doesn't see what I just explained. They do all these correlations and regressions. This is just typical Wall Street research. So they see a correlation between rising or raising rates and a stronger economy. Well, that's true. There is a correlation between raising rates and a stronger economy. Historically, it just doesn't apply now because we're guinea pigs in this experiment that I just described. So what's going on now is completely different than what Wall Street understands. All this happy talk that we know, the Fed is raising rates, so the economy must be strong. No, it is completely backwards. First of all, raising rates doesn't make the economy strong. It's the other way around. A strong economy causes the Fed to raise rates. But that doesn't even apply now because, as I've said, they're playing catch up. And this will persist. Now the Fed will raise rates 4 times a year, every other meeting for the next 3 years into 2019, allegedly, until they get them to 3.5% to 4%. Unless, he says, unless, this is important, one of 3 things causes them to pause that. There are 3 things that would cause the Fed not to raise rates. One is a market meltdown. I mean 10% or more. In other words, there's a full-blown correction. 5% won't do it. If the Dow goes down 1,000, it's not going to do it. But it's got to be double that. It's got to be double that, and on its way to like 15%, in which case the Fed would pause. The second reason is if you see job creation fall below 75,000 a month, a very low threshold, by the way. I mean, recently, monthly job creation on the most recent report was over 200,000. It was very strong. But even if you saw that 125,000 or 100,000, that's not enough. It's got to be 75,000 or less if we lose jobs. And the third thing is disinflation. The Fed has this target of 2%. They use a core PCE deflator. So year over year, PCE deflator core, they want that to be 2%. If you see that going backwards down to 1.4, 1.2 or less, that will throw the Fed off the game. But those are the only 3 things. So job creation dries up, disinflation, or some kind of market panic, either here or abroad. If you see those 3 things, the Fed will pause. If you don't see them, they're going to raise rates. So this is a very easy forecast to make. It wouldn't surprise me after those factors for them to raise 3 more times, March, September, December, or in case he said June or July. So 2, 3 more times this year. Now, I don't think they actually will. And the reason is that, the first reason I mentioned, which is in the course of raising rates, they're going to stall the economy, and then you'll see disinflation or the market crash that will cause them to pause. But we are not there yet. This won't really sink in until the summer, he says. The other thing he was talking about, which I'm just going to read the last paragraph of this one part. You can read the whole article if you want. I'll send you the link here on my description. So you have all these disaster scenarios in the making, but meanwhile, as I say, it looks like the business cycle will wind down because it's been going on so long, combined with the systemic risk we're talking about, but on a bigger scale because the banks are bigger, the balance sheets are bigger, the derivative books are bigger, and one of the key lessons or key teachings of complexity theory, which is the best way to understand the economy, is that risk is an exponential function of scale. This is key. What that means is when you have double or triple the system, you double or triple the risk. You don't just double or triple the risk. You increase it by a factor of 10 or more each time. And so we have increased the system, and we've increased the risk even more, which is why I say the next crisis is what he's now labeling an extinction-level event. Doesn't mean that literally, but it's that catastrophic in his eyes. And he mentioned in this article something like where he got to speak with Ben Bernanke or something like that and asked him something. Again, I'll link this whole thing for you to read. Take care.